The heavy wooden doors of the Fort Benning Auditorium were propped open, trying in vain to catch a breeze that wasn't there. The Georgia heat in late August was a physical presence, thick and damp, wrapping around the 100 or so soldiers filing into the cavernous room. They moved with the easy confidence of the elite, their T-shirts stretching over physiques honed by years of grueling punishment. These were the men of the 3rd Ranger Battalion, and they were here for the quarterly combatives certification. The air hummed with a low current of competition, the kind of energy that precedes a storm. In the front row, a cluster of soldiers laughed a little too loudly. At their center sat Commander Liam, the Glacier, Sharp. He wasn't a tall man, but he was built like a concrete bunker, and with a thick neck and shoulders that strained the fabric of his uniform. His nickname, the Glacier, was earned not for his speed, but for his methodical, unstoppable pressure in a fight. He would advance, absorb strikes like they were nothing, and slowly, inexorably, crush his opponent. He was a legend in the combatives community, a 2-time All-Army champion who hadn't been taken off his feet in competition in over 7 years. "So, who drew the short straw?" Sharp asked, his voice a low rumble. "Which one of you cherry blossoms is stepping into the deep end with me today?" The demonstration was a standard part of the certification. A ranked fighter would showcase techniques with a volunteer from the audience. It was supposed to be controlled. It was supposed to be instructional. A captain standing nearby gestured toward the back of the room. "Actually, sir, the commandant selected the volunteer. It's the new medic from the 317th. Specialist Jensen." The laughter in the front row stopped. A stocky staff sergeant leaned forward, a smirk playing on his lips. "Jensen? The female? Sir, with all due respect, is this a joke? We're supposed to watch you spar with a pog? She's a medic. She probably weighs 130 pounds soaking wet." Sharp didn't smile. He just looked toward the back of the room, his expression impassive. "A soldier's a soldier, Sergeant, until they're not." Maya Jensen stood by the water cooler, trying to make herself invisible. She felt the weight of the stares, the quick glances and whispered words that traveled through the crowd like a ripple. She was 5'5", lean and wiry, with the compact muscle of a distance runner. In her dress uniform, with her thick black hair pulled into a severe bun, she looked more like a high school valedictorian than a soldier. She heard a snippet of conversation from 2 Rangers passing by. "Heard she volunteered. Maybe she's got a death wish." Her jaw tightened. She hadn't volunteered. She had been handpicked by her battalion commander, a shrewd woman who knew exactly what she was doing. Maya's mind flashed back to the email she'd received that morning. "Specialist Jensen, your performance in the Level 2 Combatives course was noted. You will represent the 317th Brigade Support Battalion in the demonstration today." She remembered the Level 2 course. She had been the only woman in a class of 40. The first day, a muscular infantryman had scoffed at being paired with her, and he had tried to throw her around like a rag doll, and she had used his momentum against him, sweeping his legs and securing a rear naked choke in under 10 seconds. He tapped out, humiliated, and the rest of the class had slowly stopped treating her like a novelty. They started treating her like a threat. That was 2 years ago. She had been training in jiu-jitsu since she was 15, a secret obsession her father, a retired cop, had encouraged. "Size is an excuse," he used to tell her. "Physics is real. Leverage is real. The ground doesn't care how big you are when you hit it." "All right, listen up," the commandant's voice boomed, silencing the room. "You're here to learn, to refine, to push past your limits. Today we have a special treat. The Commander Sharp has graciously agreed to demonstrate the transition from striking to ground control. His opponent, Specialist Jensen, front and center." A fresh wave of murmurs washed through the crowd. Maya felt her stomach drop, but she forced her feet to move, one in front of the other. She walked down the long aisle between the seated Rangers, her eyes fixed on the blue mats set up in the open space at the front. She could feel the pity, the amusement, the outright hostility. She was an intruder in their temple. Sharp met her in the center of the mat. He looked down at her, his face a mask of professional detachment. He didn't see a woman. He saw a problem, a distraction. He had been given a job to demonstrate technique. He would do it efficiently and without fanfare. He extended a hand. "Commander Sharp." "No hard feelings." Maya shook it. His grip was like a steel vise, but she squeezed back with surprising firmness. "Specialist Jensen." "Thank you for the opportunity, sir." The commandant explained the drill. Sharp would work for a takedown, and Jensen was to resist and work for a defensive posture. It was supposed to last 3 minutes. "Start on my whistle." The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning unit struggling against the heat. The whistle shrieked. Sharp moved forward, his stance wide and low. He shot for a double-leg takedown, a simple, brutal, and effective move. His plan was to scoop her up, drive her to the mat, and immediately establish mount, all within 15 seconds. It would be clean. It would be definitive. He reached for her hips, and then nothing. She wasn't there. But Maya didn't try to meet his power. She flowed backward, her feet dancing lightly on the mat. As his hands grasped for her, she dropped her weight, posting one hand on the top of his head and sprawling her legs back. It was a perfect defensive sprawl, the kind that stops a charging wrestler in his tracks. Sharp's forward momentum stalled. He was left clutching air, his face pressed against the mat. The crowd stirred. That wasn't supposed to happen. Sharp recovered instantly, switching levels and trying to clinch. He grabbed her arm, trying to drag her into a body lock. Maya let him pull her, but as she came in, she wasn't stiff and resisting. She was pliable. She wrapped her own arms around his waist, not to grapple, but to feel. To feel the shift of his weight, the tension in his back, the placement of his feet. She was reading him, but for a full minute they wrestled for position. Sharp, growing frustrated, resorted to sheer strength. He lifted her slightly, trying to muscle her to the side. It was the opening she needed. As his weight shifted onto his left foot, Maya exploded. She didn't push back. She drove forward and to the side, executing a perfect foot sweep or Diashi Barai. It was a move that relied not on power, but on impeccable timing. Sharp's left leg was swept clean out from under him. For a split second, he was airborne, horizontal. The look of shock on his face was absolute. He crashed onto the mat with a thunderous slap, the air driven from his lungs. The room gasped. 100 jaws went slack. But Maya wasn't done. The drill was still live. She didn't pause to admire her work. She moved like water, flowing over him as he hit the ground. She didn't try to mount him, knowing his core strength would allow him to buck her off. Instead, she stayed glued to his side, trapping his right arm against his body with her knee and shoving her forearm across his throat, not choking, but controlling his head and neck. It was the start of a brutal submission, a modified crucifix position. Sharp was on his back, the unshakable glacier, being controlled by a medic. He was stunned, not just physically, but mentally. No one had done this to him in almost a decade. He roared, a deep, guttural sound of pure effort and rage, and tried to bench press her off him. Maya anticipated it. As he heaved, she shifted her weight, swinging her leg over his face and dropping all her weight onto his chest. She abandoned the crucifix, and in one fluid motion, I locked her legs around his torso in a body triangle. Her arms snaked under his, securing a grip on his own uniform at the back of his neck. It was over. Sharp was trapped. He was stronger, but he was in a cage made of his own limbs. He strained, his muscles cording, his face turning crimson. He tried to bridge, to roll, to do anything, but every move he made tightened the trap. Maya's body was wrapped around him like a python, and with every struggling breath he took, she squeezed a little tighter, her arms and legs working in terrible, beautiful harmony. She wasn't fighting his strength. She was using it to cinch the submission. The commandant stared, his whistle dangling from his lips. forgotten. The 100 Rangers sat in stunned silence, watching their champion, their glacier, being slowly dismantled by a soldier they had laughed at minutes ago. Maya's face, pressed against the side of Sharp's head, was calm, focused. There was no triumph there, only the deep concentration of an artist at work. Sharp's struggles weakened. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. The pressure on his ribs was immense, a deep, crushing weight that felt like they were about to splinter. He tried to tap out, but his arms were pinned. He tried to shout, but his voice was a strangled gasp. The humiliation was a fire in his gut, but the pain was a stark, cold reality. Finally, Maya leaned in, her lips close to his ear. In a voice so quiet only he could hear, she said, "It's okay, sir. You can tap your foot." Humiliation complete. He tapped his foot against the mat, 3 times. Maya released him instantly, rolling back into a seated position, her breathing even. She didn't raise her arms in victory. She just sat there looking at the commander lying flat on his back, staring at the ceiling, his chest heaving. The silence in the room was so complete, you could hear the squeak of a soldier's boot as he shifted in his seat 100 feet away. Then, a slow clap started from the back of the room. It was the battalion commandant, a wry smile on his face. He walked onto the mat, offering a hand to Maya, who took it and rose gracefully. He then offered his other hand to Sharp, pulling the dazed commander to his feet. "Well," the commandant said, his voice carrying through the silent auditorium, "I think that demonstration was far more educational than we planned. Specialist Jensen, thank you for that. A comprehensive lesson on the principles of leverage and the dangers of underestimation." He turned to Sharp, whose face was a thunderous mask of controlled fury and profound shock. "Commander, are you all right?" Sharp nodded curtly, rubbing his ribs. He didn't look at Maya. He couldn't. He walked stiffly off the mat and disappeared into the crowd, which parted for him like the Red Sea. No one dared speak to him. Maya stood alone on the mat for a moment. She looked at the crowd of Rangers, men who could snap her in half, but who now looked at her with a new expression. Respect. It was grudging, bewildered, but it was respect. She had entered their arena, played by their rules, and won. She walked back to her seat, the whispers starting again, but their tone was utterly transformed. "Did you see that sweep?" Like she was reading his mind. "Tapped his foot. Holy..." She sat down, her heart finally beginning to hammer against her ribs now that the adrenaline was fading. She stared straight ahead, her face betraying nothing. The next 2 hours were a blur. More demonstrations, more lectures. But the energy in the room had changed. Every time someone looked at the mats, they didn't see the legendary Commander Sharp. They saw the small medic, calm and lethal, wrapped around him like a chain. When the certification was finally dismissed, Maya gathered her notebook and stood to leave. She felt a presence behind her and turned. It was the stocky staff sergeant who had laughed at her earlier. He stood there, his face red, his eyes not meeting hers. He held out a bottle of water. "Here," he mumbled. Maya took it. "Thanks." He finally looked at her. That was the real deal. Where the hell did you learn to fight like that?" Before she could answer, a sharp voice cut through the crowd. "Specialist Jensen." It was Commander Sharp. He stood a few feet away, his jaw set. The staff sergeant melted away instantly. Sharp walked up to her, his presence still immense, but the invincibility was gone. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. He wasn't angry. He looked curious, and maybe just a little bit humbled. "That sweep," he said quietly. "The foot sweep. My father used it. He was a judoka, taught it to me when I was 10. I haven't seen it executed that cleanly in 20 years. Maya met his gaze. "My father was a cop. He believed in using what the other person gives you, Sir. A flicker of something crossed Sharp's face. Pain? Respect? You used my own momentum. You read my weight shift and you took my leg. He shook his head slowly, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. I didn't even see it coming. I never saw it coming. He took a deep breath, wincing slightly as his ribs expanded. You fractured one of my ribs. The doctors at the clinic confirmed it. I'll be out of training for 6 weeks. He said it not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. He finally extended his hand. This time it wasn't a challenge. It was an offer of truce. That was a gift, Specialist Jensen. A hard, humbling gift. Thank you. Maya shook his hand. His grip was firm, but no longer crushing. Thank you, sir, for not going easy on me. I couldn't have if I'd tried, he admitted. And for the first time, a real smile broke through his stern facade. Get out of here. Go call your father. Tell him his lessons landed. Maya walked out of the auditorium into the thick Georgia evening. The air was still heavy, but it felt different, lighter. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly for the first time all day. She scrolled to her dad's number and hit call. It rang once, twice. Kiddo, how'd the big demonstration go? Maya leaned against the warm brick wall of the building and let out a long, slow breath. Hey, Dad. It went okay. I think I made my point. The news spread through Fort Benning like wildfire. By morning, the story had morphed and grown. The medic who tapped out the glacier was a legend in the making. In the mess hall, Maya felt the stares, but they were different now. A young private, fresh out of basic, would approached her table, his eyes wide. Specialist Jensen, I just wanted to say, my drill sergeant told us about what you did. He said it's the best argument for why we should all be training smarter, not harder. Thanks. That afternoon, she was summoned to the battalion commander's office. Colonel Matthews, the woman who had selected her, sat behind her desk, a copy of the incident report in front of her. She looked up as Maya entered and snapped a salute. At ease, Specialist. Sit down. Matthews leaned back in her chair, studying her. I've gotten 3 calls this morning. One from the battalion commandant, praising your composure and skill. One from the head of the combatives school, asking if you'd be interested in an instructor position. She paused, a smile playing on her lips. And one from Commander Sharp. And he wanted to personally apologize for the behavior of some of his men before the demonstration. He also wanted to recommend you for an Army Commendation Medal for your instructional contributions. Maya was stunned. Ma'am, I was just following orders. Matthews laughed, a genuine hearty sound. No, Specialist. You were following instincts. There's a difference. I sent you in there to represent us. I didn't expect you to rewrite the entire base's understanding of hand-to-hand combat. You showed a room full of the Army's best that technique and heart can beat brute force. That's a lesson they won't forget. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. Take the instructor position. It's a promotion. You've earned it. Dismissed. That evening, Maya walked onto the mat at the post's small, dusty combatives gym. It was empty, but save for one person. Commander Sharp was there, stripped down to a t-shirt and shorts, working through slow, methodical drills. He was moving stiffly, his ribs taped. He saw her and stopped. For a moment, the old tension hung in the air. Then he nodded toward the mat. You here to train or just to admire your handiwork? Maya stepped onto the mat. I'm here to train, sir. He gestured to the space across from him. Show me that sweep again, the foot sweep. I want to feel what I missed. They didn't spar. For the next hour, Sharp became the student. Maya, the instructor. He would shoot for a takedown, she would defend, and they would break down the movements frame by frame. He asked questions, genuine, humble questions. She answered them with quiet confidence. The physical therapy of learning became a balm for his wounded pride. As the sun set and the gym grew dark, they sat on the edge of the mat, sweat-soaked and exhausted. Sharp looked at her, a new respect in his eyes. "You know," he said, "for 10 years, I was the king of this little hill. I thought I knew everything there was to know about fighting. Then 100 of my men watched a woman half my size use me as a lesson in humility." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Best thing that ever happened to me." "For what it's worth, sir," Maya said quietly, "you're a hell of a lot stronger than anyone I've ever fought. If I hadn't caught you off guard—" He cut her off. "You didn't catch me off guard. You outfought me, fair and square. Call me Liam. And I expect to see you here every night at 1800. We have a lot of work to do."